लोक राज दा ਇਹ हुई गिफ्ट वड्डा हक वोट दा मिलिया सारिਆਂ ਨੂੰ राज खत्म कीता राजे महाराजिਆਂ ਦਾ ਉੱਚਾ ਚੁੱਕਿਆ ਗੁਲਾਮ ਵਿਚਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ आम बंदे नूं जिउण दा चाह चढ़िया जोश बख्शिया मुकद्दरां दे हारिਆਂ ਨੂੰ सही बंदिਆਂ ਨੂੰ जौहल जे दिओ मौका ਤਾਂ ਹੀ ਤੋੜ ਸਕਣਗੇ ਅਰਸ਼ ਦੇ ਤਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ। ਪ੍ਰਾਈਮ ਏਸ਼ੀਆ ਟੀਵੀ ਦੇਖ ਰਹੇ ਸਾਰੇ ਦਰਸ਼ਕਾਂ ਦਾ ਮੈਂ ਜੁਗਰਾਜਦੀਪ ਸਿੰਘ ਪ੍ਰਾਈਮ ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਇਸ ਸ਼ੋਅ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਕਰਦਾ। ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਫੈਡਰਲ ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਅਖਾੜਾ ਪੂਰਾ ਜੋਸ਼ ਨਾਲ ਭਰਿਆ ਹੋਇਆ। ਹਰ ਇੱਕ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਅਤੇ ਹਰ ਇੱਕ ਉਮੀਦਵਾਰ ਆਪਣੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਵੋਟਰਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਭਰਮਾਉਣ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਵੱਡੇ ਵੱਡੇ ਵਾਅਦੇ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ। ਪ੍ਰਾਈਮ ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਦੀ ਇਸ ਕੜੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅੱਜ ਅਸੀਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਸਾਹਮਣੇ ਉਮੀਦਵਾਰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਏ ਹਾਂ ਬ੍ਰੈਂਪਟਨ ਨਾਰਥ ਦੇ। ਆਓ ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਵਾਕਫ ਕਰਾਉਂਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਫਿਰ ਅੱਜ ਦੀ ਡਿਬੇਟ ਦੀ ਸ਼ੁਰੂਆਤ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ। ਮੇਰੇ ਖੱਬੇ ਪਾਸੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਨੇ ਲਿਬਰਲ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਕੈਂਡੀਡੇਟ ਅਤੇ ਮੌਜੂਦਾ MP ਰੂਬੀ ਸਹੋਤਾ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ NDP ਕੈਂਡੀਡੇਟ ਮਲਿਸਾ ਐਡਵਰਡਸ ਜੋ ਕਿ ਇੱਕ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਪਲੈਨਰ ਨੇ ਅਤੇ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਇੰਟਰਨੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਪਲਾਨ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਨਾਲ ਕੰਮ ਕਰ ਚੁੱਕੇ ਨੇ। ਮੇਰੇ ਸੱਜੇ ਪਾਸੇ PPC ਕੈਂਡੀਡੇਟ ਕੀਥ ਫਰੇਜ਼ਰ ਜੋ ਕਿ ਇੱਕ ਬਿਜ਼ਨਸ ਓਨਰ ਹਨ ਅਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਕੰਜ਼ਰਵੇਟਿਵ ਕੈਂਡੀਡੇਟ ਅਰਪਨ ਖੰਨਾ ਜੋ ਕਿ ਹਾਰਪਰ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਵੇਲੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਸਟਾਫਰ ਰਹਿ ਚੁੱਕੇ ਹਨ ਅਤੇ ਜੇਸਨ ਕੈਨੀ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਵੀ ਕੰਮ ਕਰ ਚੁੱਕੇ ਹਨ। ਅੱਜ ਦੇ ਇਸ ਸ਼ੋਅ ਨੂੰ ਮੇਰੇ ਨਾਲ ਕੋ-ਹੋਸਟ ਕਰਨ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਸੰਜੀਵ ਧਵਨ ਪਹੁੰਚੇ ਨੇ। ਆਓ ਹੁਣੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਰੂਲਸ ਨਾਲ ਰੂਬਰੂ ਕਰਵਾਉਣਗੇ, ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਆਪਾਂ ਡਿਬੇਟ ਦੀ ਸ਼ੁਰੂਆਤ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ।
So Canadians will elect a new parliament on October 21st. And today Prime Asia is hosting a candidates debate for the riding of Brampton North. This 1-hour debate will cover various topics, generally climate change, economy, healthcare, immigration, affordable housing, foreign relations, issues related to Brampton, and any topic which is of national importance. The rules of the debate are: the debate questions will be in English and candidates can answer in English only. There will be 5 segments of 11 minutes. After each segment, there will be a break. Each candidate will get 1.5 minutes to speak and rebuttals will be allotted 45 seconds. Rebuttals will be permitted if a candidate or his or her party is challenged by another candidate. A reminder bell will ring when a candidate has 5 seconds of speaking time remaining. The host reserves the right to interrupt candidate who surpass their allotted time. Candidates will focus on precise questions asked by the host. If a candidate stray off the topics, the host will have the right to cut them off. In the last segment, each candidate can ask one question to a candidate of his or her choice. If a candidate chooses not to ask questions to the other candidates, the host can pose a question to any candidate for the allotted time if time permits. Candidates will be respectful to their fellows and to the host, and as well as they will respect the time also. Thank you. Now I request my co-host Jugraj to start the debate. He will start with the public safety issues.
So now the debate begins. I would like to start with the Liberal candidate Ruby Sahota. So recently we have seen that the criminal activities have increased multiple folds. Specifically talking about your riding, Brampton North, we have recently seen that there have been incidents of shooting, many incidents of break-ins. What have your government done so far on that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Yuvraj. We take this very seriously, our responsibility as a federal government to make sure that these violent acts come to an end. We've implemented common sense gun law legislation already in Bill C-71 to make background checks for guns even more stiffer. And we've heard from the Conservatives that they want to roll that back and take those checks away. We're coming up with new proposals as well. We've also made historic announcement giving the province of Ontario over $65 million, and overall in Canada we have invested over $400 million to make sure that gangs and guns are controlled by the municipal and the provincial police forces. So we're continuing to make sure that we invest highly in our CBSA and our RCMP to make sure that illegal guns that are smuggled over the border are caught in a timely manner so that they don't get into our communities. And we're going to continue to work.
Offenders are out on bail the very next day after doing the offense. So do you propose to make any changes to Canada's criminal code?
So just recently we announced with the province the $65 million announcement that was made. There is going to be a bail task force that is going to be implemented so that a very highly specialized trained group of prosecutors are able to go out and make sure sure that the proper evidence is presented so that people do not get out on bail.
Good, thank you. I'd like to come to Conservative candidate Arpan Khanna. So how much satisfied are you with the answer, and what are your plans?
Not at all, because in the last year we've seen a 15% increase in violent gun crime in our city of Brampton, which is unacceptable. This was never the case before. The Liberals talk about C-71, but I want to remind them about C-75, a bill that they brought forward which softened punishment for those that are involved in gang crimes who have been charged for date rape drugs, which used to be jail time, which is now just a fine. So they've always been soft on crime. We're big believers that criminals' rights should not be ahead of victims' rights. So we're looking at proposing bail changes, like you mentioned. Chief Saunders, the chief in Toronto, mentioned that 350 criminals that were charged with firearm offences are now out on bail. That needs to stop. So we're looking to end automatic bail for gang criminals. We're looking at making sure there's tougher mandatory sentencing to make sure that those that commit the crime are actually paying the time. We're looking at making sure the police, the local police forces, get the funding they need. So we're looking at this police infrastructure grant program, which will give polices like Peel Regional Police the tools and the funding they need to go and crack down on these gang criminals. There has to be a system. Right now, with the Liberals, there is no system. That fear of rule of law is no longer there. And we have to make sure that that is taken care of, because every single Canadian citizen that I go door knock to has raised this question. Every house has a camera on their doorstep. So the numbers they're talking about are recent numbers. They haven't been tough on crime, and that's something we will change.
Thank you very much. What's your party's plan on that?
Well, we try to get to the root causes. So we know that both race, poverty, and the lack of services that we've seen over the years, over the decades, are all kind of impacting why we're seeing this recent rise in crime, which needs to stop. So Jagmeet Singh and the NDP, we are going to get to the root causes and provide more services and programs for families so they can get ahead and we can end the violence that is happening in our city.
The PPC candidate, does your party have any platform or anything about the public safety?
We have it under our gun policy,
Okay.
For what you're talking about right now. And we want to protect the legitimate gun owners, that they should not be punished for what these criminals are doing. We need to go after the criminals. We need to, as you was talking about, we need to put them in jail. They need to stay in jail,
So
not
what is
be
your
let
plan?
out.
What is your plan?
Do you plan some changes in the criminal code?
Yes, we do. That is where it comes in for us in the legislation to make it tougher on the gangs, the organized crime, to change the laws, to keep them in jail so that they don't bail out the next day, as you see now.
Okay, we got your point. You want to say something?
Yes, absolutely. I think we have some exaggerations here. C-75 is a bill that makes it more efficient for us to process cases. It actually makes summary convictions stiffer. It takes it from 6 months to 2 years less a day. And also why criminals are out is because under the charter, the Supreme Court had held that there was a cap for how many days you could hold somebody. So over 500 criminals were let on the loose because their charges were stayed. So if a court is not efficient, you get criminals on the loose, and those criminals included murderers, included sexual assaulters, and they were on the loose due to the inefficiencies of the court system. So we're trying to make it more efficient and take guns out of the hands of criminals.
How do you plan to do that?
Well, we've made the stiffer laws. C-75 has made it courts more efficient. C-71 has made it harder to purchase a gun, and we're going to implement more things as well. I do agree with my NDP colleague that we also have to look at the root causes, and that's why we have invested historic amounts to address this problem.
Thank you, Ruby. Now we are moving to the next topic of today's debate, and that's immigration, refugees. My question will start with the People's Party of Canada, and I'm going to read a statement of Maxime Bernier, your leader. Maxime Bernier says that if he becomes Prime Minister, his government would slash immigration and refugee numbers, build a fence to block asylum seekers from walking across the border, and the program that let immigrants sponsor their families to join them. He seems to believe unaffordable housing, mess in our hospitals, crime in our cities are all problems because of the immigration. Why people should not believe PPC as anti-immigrant, anti-refugee and against family unit, and have no plan to solve Canada's problems.
Well, the one thing you talk about is the fence, the wall. It's not a wall across the country. He only talked about a wall in Quebec of that one border crossing that you do see. I'm sure you've watched the video of it, them getting out the taxis and going across the border. A fence there, a small fence, that's all, not the whole country. Then you start talking about our immigration. What we're looking for is economic immigration to come in the country. So we're looking to change it from 25% up to 50% economic immigration. So we are not against immigration. We just want to have economic people that will come to Canada, people that are going to be working in Canada. That gives you a husband and a wife, 2 kids. There's one family unit there. And yes, the other part you talked about is bringing the older people and the parents, and that will be changed.
Okay. You got the point.
We will continue the discussion on immigration matters, but we are going for a commercial break. प्राइम एशिया टेलीविजन ਦੇ ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰ ਆਪ ਜੀ ਦਾ ਫੇਰ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਔਰ ਅਸੀਂ ਡਿਸਕਸ਼ਨ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਕੈਂਡੀਡੇਟਸ Brampton North ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਔਰ now we'll go to Ruby. So what you have to say about Maxim Bernier's analysis of immigration and refugees?
Well, I feel it's un-Canadian. It's not responsible. We need to take measures to grow our economy and make sure that the country we know that gives good support, such as a universal healthcare system, a pension plan, and other social supports, is supported. And the only way to do that is through fair and responsible immigration. We have a plan. Our economic immigration right now, as was mentioned, is far higher than at 50%. It's at 72%. So that is economic immigration that we are currently bringing in, and that we are going to continue to make sure that that ratio exists so that we can make sure that we have pensions in the future. What we're looking at is a drastic decrease in our birth rate. We used to have a 7-to-1 ratio in the 70s where 7 people were working to 1 person on a pensionee, and the projections in the future are 2-to-1. That's very scary. So we need to make sure that we take the proper measures when it comes to immigration to grow our economy. This is really an economic step and an economic policy that we're creating.
Ruby, I have a follow-up question with you, but I'll come back once we give the chance to all the candidates. So now I'll give the chance to Conservative candidate Arpan to speak about.
Absolutely. You know, our country needs immigrants. That is a fact. I think no one disputes that. My colleague spoke about fair and responsible immigration. We've seen nothing like that. It's not fair, it's not responsible. You know, we look at the border from the US where we've seen refugees, literally 80,000 of them, coming from a safe country through a loophole to our country, which has caused a taxpayer burden of almost $2 billion. So not my numbers, so the PBO's numbers. We've seen backlogs in the IRB up to 3 years now. We've seen grandparents who couldn't even get sponsored because the portal closed in 7 minutes online. We have been seeing visas being rejected at a high level from India. And that's because we've seen genuine visas being refused, but other folks who are going through the back doors getting in. This abuse needs to stop.
There's a notion that when the Conservative government comes, there is a cap on the different programs and the number in the immigration, it just decreases. What do you want to say about that?
Those are numbers pushed by my colleagues from the other side who don't look at actual numbers. If you look at Immigration Canada's numbers, we had a record number of immigrants coming to this country under Conservatives. 260,000 immigrants came to this country at that time. Immigration will always continue. That is not going to stop. We need that. But there has to be a system. You cannot have abuse in the system. For the grandparents, their average is 18,000 over the last 3 years. We had 21,000. We had the super visa to make sure that parents are united with their families at a lot faster pace. So when my colleagues talk about immigration, they've completely failed on it.
Thank you.
Thanks. Melissa, what is your take on Maxim Bernier's statement?
Well, my grandparents immigrated here in the early 70s to Canada from Jamaica. My grandfather was a carpenter, my grandmother was a laborer. They worked very hard to achieve the Canadian dream of purchasing their first home, which is out of reach for most Canadians today. The Liberals and the Conservatives haven't done much to help our immigration. We believe in a fair, accountable immigration system, and we also believe that when immigrants do come to this country, that we look at their foreign credentials, and they're able to take those foreign credentials and contribute to our economy.
So which system do you consider fair? Is it the Liberal system or the system that Conservatives are proposing?
Well, I believe in a fair, compassionate system that is equal for all Canadians, and so Canadians can come here and make a better life.
Melissa, I also have a follow-up question, but I'll take after Ruby. So Ruby, Liberal Immigration Minister, Honorable Ahmed Hussain, said he wants to accept more refugees. We are already burdened, our cities are crowded, we have so many problems. What is the logic to get people from America? America is a safe country. So why people should come, and why can't we change certain systems or change our agreements with the United States so that those who coming from America, they should not be allowed to.
So the premise of that question is incorrect. Pre-approved refugees do not come from America. Those are asylum seekers that end up at the border. And we did not create this loophole under 10 years of the Conservative government. That loophole existed. We are actually been working to make sure that that loophole is fixed because of the current problem that we are facing with migration. And it's not just our country, it's the global country on whole. The Conservatives also left a mess when the immigration system with backlogs. From 2011 to 2014, they completely shut down parent-grandparent sponsorship altogether. They didn't take a single case. In the last year, we've taken 20,000 parent-grandparent sponsorships, and this year, the years before that, we took 10,000 each. The year before the election, they were taking 5. So we had cleared the backlog, and spousal sponsorship was taking up to 3 years. Now it takes 12 months. Caregiver programs used to take 60 months. Now they take 12 months. So we've been really working hard to fix the immigration system and make sure that it is fair. Plus, the stream for refugees is different than the stream that is processed for family sponsorship. IRCC processes that.
So we spoke about intake of grandparent sponsorships. Just because you increase the application number does not mean the intake has increased. Our average was 21,000. Yours is 18,000, still 3,000 short. These are not my numbers. These are immigration numbers from your own website, from the government. Refugees, we all agree. We have to be compassionate. We have to help those that need help the most. That's why we're looking at private sponsorships to make sure refugees come through the proper channels. Their Prime Minister put out a tweet saying everyone's welcome to Canada when Donald Trump got elected from the US, and they all showed up. That is not a proper way of having immigration coming to our country.
Thank you. So, Melissa, your party doesn't have any specific numbers that what number of immigrants, refugees, or the people who come from the rest of the world to Canada, they don't have any limits. Why?
Because we really shouldn't be blaming our neighbors on immigration coming here, because that isn't the issue. The issue is our healthcare crisis and our housing crisis. When we address our healthcare and our housing issues that we have here in Brampton, then they'll have those services available for them, and our neighbors and all families will be able to get ahead.
Thank you. Keith, if you want to add at the end of this topic's discussion, you have a few seconds.
No, I have nothing more to say.
Thank you very much. Now we are moving to the next topic, and that is foreign relations, and my colleague Jukraj will be taking up the foreign relations.
So I'll start with the Conservative candidate, Arpan Khanna. So in these 4 years, we've seen that Canada's position at the international stage has deteriorated. What do you have to say about that?
I think that's the best way to put it. If you look at the current Prime Minister, some of our oldest allies are now turning our back on us, whether it's the US, whether it's India, whether it's the UK. These countries are tired of a Prime Minister who does not take foreign relationships seriously. We live in a globalized world. We have to work with our allies. One of the biggest failures we saw was with China. Our talks broke down with them, and now we have 2 Canadians who are detained in China, yet we cannot get them out. I remember the Prime Minister last time during his, when he ran for his campaign, he spoke about that, and he was very upset that we couldn't do anything about it. But they're doing the exact same thing. They're not speaking up, and they're not using their position on the global stage to address these issues. We as Conservatives believe that you have to work with your allies. Whether it was their failures on NAFTA, they're not negotiating with the best interests of Canadians. They're not signing deals. We had 40 to 50 free trade deals with the Conservatives. We have to work with other countries, and under Andrew Scheer will make sure that it's a principled stance. We will always stand up for democracy, human rights, and the rule of law, but we have to make sure we work as partners. So that way we have that relationship.
When we're talking about the international relations, we want the world peace also.
100%.
And we need to have very good relations with all the nuclear nuclear powers. And your leader, Andrew Scheer, is not even allowed to go to Russia. He's banned to go to Russia. So how, if we Canadian have Andrew Scheer as our prime minister, he will deal with the nuclear powers?
I think that's the job of prime minister. I think if there's political stuff going on, it doesn't matter because there's two countries. They both respect their role as prime minister, and that's up to us to make sure we work on those relationships. By going around dancing and not signing a single deal in India, that was a troublesome thing to see. And I know the member opposite was there. That's not what people want to see in a prime minister. Being a prime minister is a very, very serious job, and it requires you actually going there, sitting down, having discussions, having deals, and which we haven't seen that yet.
What's it take the Liberal Party on that?
We've been working very hard to make sure that Canada is on the world international stage, whether that's vying for a Security Council seat. Over the 10 years of the Conservative government, Canada wasn't even mentioned on the international stage. So we are back. We have signed very difficult deals when it comes to trade, and that is a telling sign of us being able
Ruby,
to talk to different countries.
You for just 1 second and I'll let you speak. Now, Trudeau's attempt to belittle Trump without realizing the consequences led to a horrendous diplomatic blunder in the shape of USMCA trade deal, in which Canada was effectively left out of Mexico-US negotiations and had to accept what it was given.
We got a deal. We got a good deal. NAFTA was renegotiated. The leader of the Conservatives wanted to capitulate, wanted to give in and give America whatever they wanted.
But that
we
led to
negotiated tough.
Let me put another question related to that. But by eroding Canada's dairy protections, farmers carrying on with high steel tariffs, adding sunset clause, are these really a good deal?
So tariffs have been removed. Trade has continued. We have $2.2 billion of trade going over the US-Canada border daily, and that has carried on. In a very difficult situation, Trudeau and the Foreign Affairs Minister was able to get Canada a good deal, was also able to approve CETA, which the Conservatives were unable to do. We were also able to approve CPTPP, which with Asian Pacific countries. We've opened up markets of over 1.5 billion people.
But we have to go for a commercial break.
ਸਾਰੇ ਦਰਸ਼ਕਾਂ ਦਾ ਬ੍ਰੇਕ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰ ਫਿਰ ਤੋਂ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਹੈ। ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਬ੍ਰੈਂਪਟਨ ਨਾਰਥ ਦੇ ਕੈਂਡੀਡੇਟਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਤੇ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੀ ਸੀਗੀ ਫੋਰਨ ਅਫੇਅਰਸ ਅਤੇ ਟ੍ਰੇਡਸ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ। ਆਪਾਂ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਨੂੰ ਜਾਰੀ ਰੱਖ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਲਿਬਰਲ ਕੈਂਡੀਡੇਟ ਰੂਬੀ ਸਹੋਤਾ ਨਾਲ। So we were talking about the foreign relations and what would you like to say about the relationship, the trade relation between Canada and China?
Yeah, well, we are a player in that negotiation, but of course we're working with our allies to make sure that we continue to have access to big markets. But we're also not going to just capitulate on our values. Human rights are important to Canadians, and we want to make sure that the value of labor and the value of human life is respected, and also that genders are respected all across the world.
How would have a conservative government reacted in this situation?
I think that was overall the intent they had to go sign these deals. This is supposed to be NAFTA 2.0. This is NAFTA 0.5. Every single day there's a big trucking industry in our riding, and they're all struggling. And they're saying that resources we used to have, the steel tariffs, have actually hurt our businesses here in Brampton.
Now, how about the China and Canada relations?
China, Canada, you have to have a very, very strong approach. They went there and they didn't respect the Chinese protocol.
No, but what they say is they respect human rights. That's why they stand for it. Do you stand for that, and how would they have reacted to that?
That's why Andrew Scheer has committed to negotiate a free trade with China. We're looking at diversifying our economy. We cannot be reliant on a few countries. In Canada, we have to make sure we diversify. They mentioned CETA, they mentioned TPP. Those were frameworks that we negotiated when we were in power. They just signed the paper.
We got done.
Which you signed because we weren't in power, but thanks to you. We did
Lisa
that
will
framework.
continue to talk her opinion about foreign relations, but I'm going to raise a specific question to you. The Trudeau's government, they basically did deal and they sold arms to Saudi Arabia, and especially to the country which beheads the feminist and LGBT persons Trudeau stands for. What's your take on that?
So Jagmeet Singh and New Democrats, we believe Canadian interests are best served by strong and principled foreign policies based on human rights.
Will you cancel the deal if your party comes to the power? That's my question.
Well, Jagmeet would cancel the deal because there are deferred human rights, and we always go based on the rights of humans.
Okay.
So what's your party stand on that?
On what you were just talking about, or
Yes, foreign relations and trade.
Okay, on trade, we believe in free trade. We would like to have trade with friendly countries and our allies. We want this trade to be what's best for Canada. So we are looking after the Canadian interest.
How do you plan to improve relations between India, China, or China, Canada? Oh, sorry, India and Canada, and China and Canada.
Well, to solve the relations with India is not have Trudeau. I mean, that would be the beginning for what happened there at the time.
But you don't have any such plans laid down right now?
No, we don't have an actual policy. We have a general policy on it to deal with free trade with other nations.
Okay, we'll just move to the next topic now.
Candidates of Brampton North have discussed the issue of foreign trade, and now we are coming to one of the important issues. There's a lot of discussion and things are happening on the social media. The wars are taking place, personal attacks, they are happening. I will go to NDP candidate to start the debate on this. Andrew Scheer has accused Justin Trudeau for personal attacks in a tweet which included 30-second video of Andrew Scheer seeming to make a dig at Trudeau. The Conservative leader opened by saying, Justin Trudeau is at it again. Before adding, he launching personal attacks, making things up that are not true. He did it to Jody Wilson, now he's doing to me. In a response to that, another person tweeted, in response to Andrew Scheer, one Twitter user wrote, "Are you serious? Is there a micro ounce of self-awareness in your remote controlled programming? All you have done for months is lie about Trudeau and make nasty, misleading statements about him. Now, above it all, Andy, don't piss in my ear. Tell me it's raining."
So what do you want to say about the personal comments that are going on the social media?
We don't really kind of touch, Jagmeet Singh and the NDP don't really kind of touch on the personal attacks because we don't see that as fair. We play for politics.
Because we are getting very close to the American elections where people make personal attacks an important thing.
Yes, and that's true. And us New Democrats, we don't do with the personal attacks. We go by our great policies that we're pushing forwards to help everyday Canadians and families.
Okay, I'll go to the PPC.
Well, I do agree with what you have been just saying. We don't need to attack each other. It should not happen and should be avoided as much as possible. Canadians are peace-loving people, friendly people. We're not like the Americans where, you've seen their debates where they're attacking each other. We don't want that. We want to talk, we want to get our points across, and like we're talking here.
Okay. Your take, Ruby.
Well, we saw in the last 2015 election, there were a lot of ads rolled out by the Conservative Party that spent time discussing hairdos and looks rather than policies and character. I think that is important, and we should, I agree with my colleagues, talk about character of people and what their beliefs may be, but not about how they look. So no, of course not, and I think most Canadians would agree.
Arpan.
I think I agree with the sentiments of most of my candidates up here. We're here to have a policy discussion who can lead this country. While people focus on the negatives, but Justin Trudeau is doing this because he can't defend his own record. He's pointing fingers because he cannot speak about his record for the last 4 years, one of failure. Personal attacks have no place in our community. Our campaign has been one of positive work. We've been putting a positive message in our community, and that's what it should be about.
But Arpan, your own name has come into the national newspapers about your comments when you were a teenager. What do you have to say about that?
We all make mistakes. I've apologized for that, but at the same time, it's about the future. It's about who I am today, and my job has always been to make sure I build a society which is inclusive to everyone. And those that are going to play games, they're going to play games. That is what we've seen an increase in, and it's sad to see that because we're not having a thoughtful discussion. Then we're not having a productive community because what happens is they try to sidetrack that. My vision and my goal is to focus on the people of Brampton North to make sure that they have the resources they need and that I can fight for them in Ottawa.
What do you want to say about that? Is it ethical?
Well, I stick by what I've said before. I think character is important to know for all of the candidates. I don't think looks and any of that stuff matters, which was focused quite a lot in the 2015 campaign, but we all saw that that was not successful. But the type of candidates that a party chooses to run, that can
even
be
in 2019 elections it's happening, so that's why we just brought up this question.
The type of candidates that a party chooses to run can be telling, so I know that the media has been talking quite a bit about that. and I think it is important when it is about someone's character and when it's about someone's beliefs.
So now we are moving to the next topic, and Jugraj will talk about affordable housing.
So I would like to start with the NDP candidate. Your leader has announced that they're going to build 500,000 new homes, affordable homes, and they promised lots of other stuff in regards to affordability. But what have not been come to the light is how are you going to cost for it? Have you costed it? Where the money is going to come from?
Yes, we have. So Jagmeet Singh and the NDP, we're putting a very bold initiative through to actually deliver on affordable housings for all Canadians. We have seen that the Liberals and the Conservative government have neglected our affordable housing crisis, and it's right here in Brampton
But
North.
the question is, we know the platform, but where the money is going to come from?
So we do plan on taxing the top 1%.
But when you're taxing people, then say the businesses, it's going to affect negatively to the employment, to the business.
It's going to come down.
And the economy we have seen, whenever we have done that, we had a provincial government of NDP long time back, and people still remember it. We had a provincial government of NDP in Alberta, and NDP says that we do everything for the common people, and the common people didn't vote them in Alberta. How do you answer that?
So we are working for the everyday person and families.
So everyday
we do plan on taxing people that make
Melissa,
$20 million or more.
People who are working, those are 80% of the population. But
Yes.
when you lose the elections in a big way after 4 years of the rule, people lost their jobs. How do you answer that?
But we do have a plan that we are going to be creating a lot more jobs right here in Canada. We are tackling the housing crisis so people can find affordable housing. If you find affordable housing, you are able to afford your house. Most people are living paycheck to paycheck right now. It's just not right. We need to solve these problems right at the root cause, and affordable housing across the country is going to help many Canadians.
Conservative candidate, Liberals claim that they have done they've taken a lot of big steps to curb this issue. How much satisfied with you are you with those?
I think they've created the issues. They were the party that brought in the stress test, which has sidelined millennials and young folks and first-time home buyers to even get into the market. When I meet with industry leaders, when I meet with everyday Canadians, they're struggling to get qualified despite making six figures. So Andrew Scheer,
if Andrew Scheer becomes the Prime Minister, will he remove the stress test?
We have committed to sitting down and evaluating that to make sure that
So that means it's not evaluated yet?
We're looking at making sure that there's a
Because if
plan.
it's not evaluated, then you cannot blame for it.
Andrew Scheer made an announcement at the National Home Builder Association where he has clearly said that he will be looking at it by reducing it or looking at other measures to either get rid of it altogether. So we are reviewing it depending on the situation, but we're also looking at working with our municipal partners, working with provincial partners to see how we could create this kind of environment where there's home...
Thanks, Arpan. We are going for a commercial break, and we'll come back.
ਸਾਰੇ ਦਰਸ਼ਕਾਂ ਦਾ ਬ੍ਰੇਕ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰ ਫਿਰ ਤੋਂ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਹੈ। ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਬ੍ਰੈਂਪਟਨ ਨਾਰਥ ਦੇ ਕੈਂਡੀਡੇਟਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਤੇ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ ਅਫੋਰਡੇਬਲ ਹਾਊਸਿੰਗ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ। ਸੋ ਆਈ ਵੁੱਡ ਲਾਈਕ ਟੂ ਕਮ ਟੂ ਲਿਬਰਲ ਕੈਂਡੀਡੇਟ। You've said that you've brought in a first-time home buyer initiative, but Canadians feel that you've taken an opportunity and partnered with them. What do you want to say about that? You've become a shareholder.
Okay, well, we're trying to get people into their first home. Affordability is very important to our government. Therefore, that's why you're hearing of all the different measures that we have taken and the ones that we're moving forward that we're going to continue to take. So there has been a new initiative announced. The previous one was for homes for almost up to 500,000. Now we've increased that limit to 800,000. This helps a first-time home buyer even get into the home that they may not have ever had the opportunity to get into. So we think it is a very, very good policy because the people in the home do not have to pay that money back until they sell that home or up to 25 years. In terms of the whole housing strategy that we've created, the target is to reduce homelessness up by 50%. That is an incredible goal. Along with the other initiatives that we've put out, we've reduced poverty. Over 800,000 people have been lifted out of poverty, and we're going to continue to do that. We've built more affordable housing, 4 times more than the Conservatives did in 10
What
years.
about the stress
in
test?
4
Because
years.
it doesn't make it qualify the first-time home buyers very soon.
In 4 years, we've done more than the Conservatives did in 10. When it comes to the stress test, it's very rich to see that we have to be a responsible government. And even as you're hearing from the leader of the Conservatives, he's just going to reevaluate. That is a commitment that our finance minister has also made. They're watching the market very closely, and we have never taken that off the table. So things can change if this ends up being an issue where people are locked out.
Thank you. Does your party have any plan for that?
Our plan comes under our immigration policy. What we're seeing is there's 3 main centers in Canada: Montreal, GTA, and Vancouver. Those are the prime areas where our new immigrants want to come into and want to settle and live. With our immigration policy of reducing the number of immigrants and also qualifying them as they come in the country as economic immigrants, then we're going to have a lower demand on housing. And that should therefore...
But that's going to affect the economy as well. How are you going to sustain the economy then?
Well, because we have economic immigration. Everybody's going to be out working. They're consumers.
But you're going to reduce the numbers.
Yes, we are. But in the end, we still have the same or even more numbers of people working. And that's what we want. We want people working, contributing to Canada.
But when people come to the country, so hundreds or thousands or hundreds of thousands, that creates a demand in the economy. Demand for food, demand for all different houses. So that makes the economy as engine move forward.
Yeah, but it moves everything up in price, and that's what you don't want. You want housing to be affordable. If you keep moving the less supply, more demand, it's going to go up and up, and we have to stop that.
Okay,
so that's how.
You wanted to say something?
Absolutely. So it's kind of rich coming from my Liberal colleague that they create the problem, and then they want a pat on the back for solving the problem. When they first came with the first-time home buyer, it was only qualifying for up to $400,000. Which GTA house is close to $400,000 to buy?
But that program is not just for GTA, it's for Canada.
Yeah, but we have a huge problem here in GTA. Our prices are skyrocketing. Affordable housing is a big issue. It's hard to get even for rentals. The price has gone up. They talked about poverty. Half Canadians are living paycheck to paycheck. They're $200 away from insolvency. They may have created jobs, but the wage growth has been one of the lowest in the times. The cost of living has gone up. So it's kind of rich. They're talking about, creating these problems and finding these programs. But if they just get out of the way and let the market do its job,
so you believe they've created a job which has helped in improving the economy as well?
Sorry?
So you believe that they've created more jobs than it has helped to move the economy of the country as well?
The economy, when I go door to door, people are struggling. They're barely getting by. And that's why under Andrew Scheer's government, we're going to make sure there's a plan.
People are in such a bad situation now. If the Conservative government comes, for all those areas which are under the federal government's preview, will you increase their minimum wage?
So what we looked at, and our leader made an actual commitment the other day, is to introduce the universal tax cut. So those that are the lowest bracket of our tax system, we're going to reduce it from 15 to 13.75%, which means they'll get more money back into their pockets. Our campaign is focused on that, whether it's giving our public transit credit back to people that are taking transit, whether it's the home heating hydro GST exemption, whether it's the carbon tax, getting rid of that. The life under the Liberals has been expensive. And for their failures, we're paying for it. So they keep raising taxes.
So
Andrew Scheer will not do that.
On one hand, you're promising tax cuts and rebates. On the other hand, you're saying you're going to balance the books. How are you going to balance it?
So we promised in the next 5 years to balance the budget. We're going to do it responsibly. Unlike the Liberals who are spending money like drunken sailors,
what's your plan?
We're going to cut stuff like the $12 million they gave to Loblaws, a multi-billion-dollar corporation, for fridges. We're going to cut stuff like they did. They took a $17,000 chef to India to cook Indian food from Canada. How does that make any sense? They've been wasting money across the world. They've been wasting money here. All they want to do is tax. Andrew Scheer wants to make life more affordable, and we're going to give tax cuts.
What's your take on that?
Well, I think Mr. Khanna just mentioned it himself. Life is hard to afford, and therefore there is a debt crisis going on, and the stress test was a responsible way to make sure that people were not living beyond their means. Going forward, in terms of giving people a cut in their taxes, that decreases revenues, and that means cuts to services. So I don't think Canadians will be naive enough to fall for that, because they know, and we've seen here provincially from the Conservative government, that they are willing to cut everything, even education.
What do you want to say about the reckless spending that they mentioned too?
We've seen that their deficits have been just as high and as long with they've been cutting services. Cutting services is detrimental to Canadians. Ask the children that are in schools right now that don't have a place, that can't go into university next year because they can't take their calculus class.
The question is about spending, like the reckless spending that Liberals are doing.
The spending that we are doing is responsibly, and we're investing in different sectors. We're investing in transit, we're investing in housing, we're investing in Canadians so that we can grow our economy. And the proof has been in the pudding. The last 4 years, over 1 million jobs have been created, and we have the lowest unemployment on record. So the last 40 years, there has been no record that had lower unemployment than today. So that is the proof that our economic stimulus spending, our investments have had a good effect on Canadians.
Thank you, guys. So now we are going to talk the next most important topic for normal Canadians, Bramptonians, and Ontarians, healthcare. So my question will go to Arpan.
Right.
So there's too much federal meddling in the healthcare. Why not make provinces, territories fully responsible for funding and managing health services, so that there's no blame game that we are not getting stuff from the federal government, or federal MP says we are bringing it, but the province is not ready for it. To do that, we can replace the federal health transfer with tax points, allowing provinces to raise their own money. We should have more options for the private healthcare. What's your take on that?
Right, so I'm a big believer of public healthcare. I live right behind the hospital, and I have aging parents who are reliant quite a bit on the hospital. I think without the public healthcare system, it'd be very, very tough.
No, we are not saying that public healthcare system should not be there. We are simply saying that let's have a private, those who are rich, they want to pay, want to get services quick, good. So that means the public health system has less burden. Why not go for that?
I'm not a big believer of two-tier systems, but for right now, what we, the reason why the federal government gets involved is because of our actual constitutional setup. The federal government is responsible for those transfers. So our leader, Andrew Scheer, has already been on the record.
Why I'm saying that is we don't have enough hospitals in Brampton.
I agree with you.
And from the last 5 years, 10 years, I have been participating in the election interviews for from 2007. And every time we listen that there will be when we come to power, there will be a hospital for Brampton. Nothing happens. Why not make it an independent system so that no government blame on the other? Ford is not going to work with Justin Trudeau, or even Patrick Brown is not going to work with Ford, or Ford is not going to work with Patrick Brown. Make it simple.
See, I think that's the problem right now. We have to make sure we have people that unite as opposed to divide. We've seen politicians point fingers, including the representative here, saying, oh, look, it was this government. They've had a Liberal premier for 3 years. They had a Liberal leading mayor for 3 years. They were in power themselves for 3 years. So they had all the opportunity to make those changes, and they were absent. They didn't speak up then. And all of a sudden now, because they can't talk about their own record, they're pointing fingers. So Andrew Scheer has a commitment. It doesn't matter what level it is, doesn't matter what party it is. I've committed to making sure that I work with all parties because it affects all of us.
NDP leader has said that if he comes to power, he'll bring the hospital to Brampton. Do you commit to the people of Brampton that if you win and the Conservative Party win, you will make sure that Brampton gets a hospital?
I think the main purpose is that we have to work with our partners. They're making promises that they can't even keep. It's not the way it works. But our job is to work with all provinces and all municipalities to make sure they get the funding they need. Do we need a second hospital? Absolutely. Brampton needs a second hospital. We're the lowest per capita funded municipality at all sectors.
Thanks.
So we definitely need
Thanks. Quickly, what's your take on this statement?
Just 45 seconds.
Well, I do agree on a lot of things that you said on the hospital policy, but especially the part about the federal government. Our policy is right now that $40 billion is transferred to the provinces, and that's equivalent to what the GST that the government collects.
So what part of my statement you don't agree with?
Most of your statement I agree with, but I would like to finish what I'm saying.
Because
you're talking about the federal.
Keith, we are going to give you time. We are going to come back after a commercial break, and we'll continue with Keith. प्राइम एशिया टेलीविजन दर्शक एक बार फिर स्वागत election debate to which, and we were talking to Keith. So Keith, continue your point.
Yes, our policy is to use what the federal government gets in the GST right now and transfer all that to the provinces throughout the country. Any province that is short on money, there will be a interim process of sending the money, so that it would not be a federal issue, it would be a provincial issue, and that's where it needs to be, is a provincial issue. The provinces know where to put the money, but there has to also be the accountability of this money, and that's what we want. We want accountability to see where all these billions of dollars go, and then when you elect your representatives in the provincial government, question them on them. Make sure that they do build your hospital so that you get your hospital that you need.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask the NDP candidate, your leader has promised to build a hospital in Brampton. This is an issue that comes under provincial scope. Why are you promising something which doesn't even come under federal scope?
Because our leader Jagmeet Singh has worked and served our community for many years, and he knows that healthcare, we have a crisis here in Brampton.
It's a provincial, these things
I understand that, and we've been working very hard provincially on the provincial level. Jagmeet has been to address the situation, which we have been unable to address. On the federal level, Jagmeet's going to work with all three levels of government to ensure that we can get an additional hospital here in Brampton. I don't see why all three levels of government would decline money to build a hospital in Brampton.
Melissa,
we have one hospital.
Many people say that Jagmeet can promise anything because NDP has never come to power, so he can say whatever he wants to say. Has he done any numbers?
So we do have to remember our leader, Tommy Douglas, he was the first one that brought universal healthcare to Canada. And Jagmeet is taking that one step further to provide us with an additional hospital, provide us with funding for Peel Memorial Urgent Care, as well as provide us with total pharmacare. That will include prescription drugs and head-to-toe coverage. So you'll have your hearing, your dental, your vision, and your mental health covered.
Thank you. So you've been an MP for Brampton North for almost 4 years. Why we don't have a Brampton hospital in Brampton right now?
We've reached a historic agreement with the provinces in order to transfer a bilateral agreement to transfer more in healthcare transfers. So we have been transferring more. We've agreed up to 4.1%. And Mr. Khanna is right that the Conservative leader has put it in writing that he agrees up to 3%. 3% would mean that we would be looking at $1.5 billion in healthcare cuts in the transfer from the federal government to the province. Now, I'm not a mathematician, but I'm pretty sure that now that Doug Ford is also cutting at the provincial level, if there are federal transfer cuts as well, that does not equal more services, another hospital, or any improvement in healthcare.
It's a common knowledge that previous mayor of Brampton, Linda Jaffrey, was blamed by Liberal MPs for not asking for federal funding for Brampton. Is it correct?
I can tell you this, that with this council and the last council, we have been working very hard, and the municipality here in Brampton is quite happy that the federal government has been partnering with them, and every single project that we have received in the last 4 years has been approved by our government. So most infrastructure projects and projects, they come bottom up. They come from the city. Once council approves them, they come up the chain through the province and then to us. We have approved everything we've received, and we want to continue working with the provincial government and the municipal
government. Thank you. We've got a point. Now we're moving to the next topic. We're going to talk about economy. So I would like to start with the Conservative candidate.
I'll just add here that now we'll be giving you only 45 seconds to respond, because this is the last segment, and we're still going to allow you to ask a question to the other candidates. So only 45 seconds response and no follow-up questions.
So my question to the Conservative candidate is, recently Ontario elected a Conservative government, and what they have discovered large deficits in here, and in order to balance that, they're implementing spending cuts. If your government comes in power at the federal level and they face similar situation, where are you going to implement the cuts?
Well, I think now on national level, we've seen a reckless spending happening by Justin Trudeau, because it's the same people running the show there that were from Kathleen Wynne's office. So the same mess is now happening on a federal level.
So are you going to do the same thing which
absolutely not. What we're looking at is to make sure that we do it responsibly, that we look to cut the excessive waste, the money that's being spent out. $250 million that are going to China to help build their roads. We're going to cancel that grant that we're giving them. We're going to make sure life is affordable for all Canadians. We're not the cuts, like I mentioned before, wasting money for fridges for Loblaws is not helping them.
Well, that is what Doug Ford said when he was running for the campaign, and he said he's not going to make any cuts, which the situation is different when now he's in the power.
Well, that's why we have a good opportunity now to vote the Liberals out, because if they carry on the mess they're doing, what they're going to do is they're either going to raise your taxes or they're going to offer you a tax cut.
Thank you. We've got a point. Liberal candidate, you have 45 seconds to rebuttal.
Yeah, and we've seen on video footage that the leader of the Conservatives has said that they will have to find cuts. They just have to make sure that they communicate it in a way that people will better understand those cuts. So they're going to be very careful how they communicate it, but cuts are definitely in store with the Conservative government.
Okay, what's the NDP take on that?
And the NDP will be creating good paying jobs for everyday Canadians, because we know right now there's a lot of precarious work and part-time jobs for families and they can't get ahead. So we're going to create more jobs for everyday families so they can get ahead, as well as increase the federal minimum wage to $15 per hour.
Well, what we need to do is balance the budget. And we're the only party that wants to balance the budget in 2 years. We have to stop spending more than what we make. Just the same way in our house. We live by our paychecks. We don't go and overspend all the time. We need to control the spending. We need to build the economy that way. It will help build our dollar as well, with a
Many
strong
times
economy.
when we try to do that, it brings recession in the economies.
That was many years ago that we had the recession. I remember those days. But we just
So that
need to be
means it's a wrong
careful.
view.
Hopefully not.
We got your point. We got your point. Coming to Liberal candidate, you promised in 2015 election that you're going to balance the books by the end of 4 year, which we have not seen. So what do you want to say on that?
I think we're taking a very responsible approach, and given the current climate, it's best to invest and create more growth. So we've been focused on creating more jobs. Our debt to GDP ratio is shrinking, and that is a sign of us taking responsible measures and investing in the proper areas. We're going to continue to do that, and that will help as long as our revenue coming in is growing, and that it is. We're going to continue on that path. Our debt is better than all G7 countries.
So now we are in the last segment of our debate. Every candidate will get 20 seconds to ask a question to the candidate of the choice, and every candidate who's asked question will take 45 seconds to answer it.
Respond to that. Yep.
So
I'll start with the Conservative candidate.
All right.
Well, my question is very simple. Obviously, when there was Liberal at the federal level, there was Liberals at the provincial level, there was Liberals in the city level with the mayor being Liberal. Right now you're blaming, this is to Ms. Soda, right now you're blaming other levels of government for your own failures. Why aren't you taking leadership and speaking up for Brampton and Brampton North in particular?
45 seconds.
In that time, we approved over 4,000 infrastructure projects in Ontario. We've brought a cybersecurity center. We've got a world-renowned electric bus system now, where it's the first in the world. We've invested heavily in our transit system. So we're going to continue to work with our different levels of government. A lot of this work was done with the previous mayor and the current mayor now. So we're going to continue to work. We had a 10-year Conservative government.
The question
in
is,
place,
there's lack of
and
cooperation between the two tiers of the government.
well, we've heard from the Conservative provincial government that they're waiting for our federal election to pass, and then they'll be more than happy to work with us after that, and so will we.
Thanks, Ruby. So, Keith,
Yes,
any question you want to ask?
yes, to
anybody?
the Liberal. In the month before the election was called, Justin Trudeau and his cabinet ministers traveled across Canada. During that time, they made, $10 billion worth of promises in the ridings. They were out there buying votes, basically, by doing such a thing. Is it fair and is it ethical to use taxpayers' money to go on an election campaign?
40 seconds.
The writ has recently dropped and the official election campaign has started. I think it's fair to put forward to Canadians. It's fair to keep up with the commitments that we have made in the past. We were only delivering on the commitments that were made and were promised. And I think Canadians have a choice, a clear choice now moving forward, whether they're going to go back to the Harper years or whether they want to move forward on the things that we have delivered and move forward on other things that we are going to deliver.
Thanks, Ruby. So it's your turn to ask questions.
Okay, I'd like to definitely go back to my NDP opponent, and if you could clarify a little bit for us, because it seems a little bold to say that a hospital can be specifically promised for Brampton. I know that at the federal level, now having worked as a member myself for 4 years, that it can be complicated, but we're there to assist the provinces. If this specific project is not brought forward, how can you guarantee delivery?
Yes.
So Jagmeet Singh and the NDP have made a commitment to Brampton for this hospital. Jagmeet will be working with all 3 levels of government to ensure that we can implement a hospital right here in Brampton. I don't understand why any level of government would reject money from the federal government to build a hospital and alleviate the healthcare crisis that we currently have.
You have the last question to ask if you want to ask.
Thank you. So my question is for Ms. Sahota. We have had not one, not two, not three, not four, but 5 Liberal MPs, and you've also held the majority nationwide. Why do we still have a healthcare crisis, a housing crisis, and affordability crisis right here in Brampton?
We've been working hard over the last 4 years as a united team, all 5 of us MPs, to work with the city on any projects that they want to bring forward. And like I've said previously, we've approved 100% of the projects that have been brought forward to the federal government. We're going to continue to make sure that we help our municipalities. We've transferred a gas tax transfer because of the cuts that were made by the Conservative provincial government. We made sure we covered that gap. We covered the gap for electric buses as well. And we'll continue to do so.
We are out of time, and you guys will conclude.
ਸੋ ਇਹ ਸਨ ਬ੍ਰੈਂਪਟਨ ਨਾਰਥ ਦੇ ਉਮੀਦਵਾਰ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੇ ਆਪਣੀ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਰੱਖੀ, ਆਪਣੀ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਦੀਆਂ ਪਾਲਿਸੀਜ਼ ਬਾਰੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਹੈ। ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਕਿੰਨਾ ਕੁ ਸਹਿਮਤ ਜਾਂ ਅਸਹਿਮਤ ਹੋ, ਇਸ ਦਾ ਫੈਸਲਾ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪ ਕਰਨਾ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਅਕਤੂਬਰ ਦੀਆਂ ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਪਣਾ ਵੋਟ ਪਾ ਕੇ ਇਸ ਦਾ ਜਵਾਬ ਦੇ ਦੇਣਾ। ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਲੱਗਿਆ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਲਿਖ ਭੇਜਣਾ। ਮੈਂ ਧੰਨਵਾਦ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦਾ ਆਪਣੇ ਕੋ-ਹੋਸਟ ਸੰਜੀਵ ਜੀ ਦਾ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੇ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਸਾਥ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਇਸ ਡਿਬੇਟ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ। ਸਾਨੂੰ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਲਿਖ ਭੇਜਣਾ, ਸਾਨੂੰ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਈਮੇਲਸ ਦੀ ਉਡੀਕ ਰਹੇਗੀ। ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜੁੜੇ ਰਹੋ ਪ੍ਰਾਈਮ ਏਸ਼ੀਆ ਟੀਵੀ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ। ਮੈਨੂੰ ਦਿਓ ਇਜਾਜ਼ਤ, ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਆਪਣਾ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਲਈ।